So you want to buy a new computer. Well, make sure you answer these 5 questions so you maximize your options. Question number 1. Are you looking for portability? Are you going to be taking this device, say, to a class, a friend's place, a cafe, or possibly work? Or are you going to plop the thing down somewhere and just do what needs to be done there? Depending on the answer to that question, you want to choose between a laptop or a desktop. Now, laptops are good for people who move around a bit and want to take their system with them, whether for work or personal use wherever they go. But that mobility does come at a price with more restrictions and difficulties when you want to upgrade the machine. This is why it's crucial that you get the components in the machine that you want when you purchase it, because it's far more difficult to upgrade it later. Now, desktops are great for individuals who want maximum flexibility and have no intention of taking the device to another location. Additionally, desktops are much easier to upgrade, add memory, storage, and more at a future date or when technologies change. Also, do you need or want multiple monitors? Depending on what you purchase, desktops tend to be more multi-monitor friendly than laptops. That's not to say you can't have a laptop with multiple monitors connected to it, or say a docking station, but desktops usually have more options open to them. Question 2. PC or Mac? Now, I know, the age-old question. Are you a PC or a Mac person? Most people tend to stick with what they're used to. So if you're a PC person, stick with a PC. Or if you're a Mac person, stick with a Mac. I'm not saying that you can't switch platforms if you really want to. You most certainly can. But be warned, there's usually a very steep learning curve when switching from a PC to a Mac or the other way around. Also, you need to make sure that any software you're going to run on the new machine will run on your platform of choice. A shiny new PC won't do you any good if you have your heart set on running Final Cut Pro, a Mac-specific software package. Question number 3. What are the minimum and recommended hardware requirements? This is a tricky question and one you need to think about very carefully. For example, if you're getting a PC with Windows that only has 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gig storage drive, and Intel graphics, you're not about to go rendering a 60-minute video or folding proteins on it with heavy-duty scientific calculations. The same goes for a Mac. Just because you can get a base model with 8 gigs of RAM doesn't mean you should. Here's the hardware I would look for at an absolute minimum. For a PC, an AMD or Intel processor with at least 4 cores on it. It used to be that you looked at the megahertz or gigahertz speed of the processor or CPU, but that's since changed to the number of cores. Think of a core as an individual worker and multiple cores as multiple individual workers working together to get a task done. The more cores, the faster the processor will be. Also for Intel, you may see terms like i3, i5, i7, or i9 thrown about. Just keep in mind that those are models of the CPU, and the higher the number means a more powerful processor. In all honesty, I would avoid an i3 if at all possible. It's not that an i3 is a bad processor, but it's going to be underwhelming when compared to the others for typically a very small amount of money. At least 16 gigs of physical RAM. Now, RAM is the lifeblood of the machine. Everything that's done on the machine goes through RAM, so you want to make sure there is plenty available for now and the future. A solid-state drive or storage. Years ago, most computers had spinning disks or hard drives in them, and although these were cheap and had very large capacities, they also tended to be slow and suffered from occasional failures. Since solid-state storage has become far more popular and affordable, most machines will come by default with solid-state or SSDs as they're known. If you don't want to sit there pulling your hair out, make sure you have a solid-state drive for your storage. A bare minimum capacity of 256 gigs. More if you can afford it. Here's a pro tip for you. Depending on your graphical needs and if you're getting a laptop, get the best video adapter in your budget that you can afford when you purchase it. This is because it's extremely rare that you can ever upgrade the video adapter in a laptop because it's usually completely hardwired into the motherboard and cannot be removed. Now, minimum recommendations for a Mac, many of the same type of recommendations apply. You also want multiple cores, at least 16 gigs of RAM, and solid-state storage. Recommendations for a PC. Now, for a processor or CPU, I'd get as many cores as you can comfortably afford. It's kind of like deciding on the V6 or V8 for that new half-ton pickup truck you're looking at getting. You're not going to be disappointed with the additional cores. And unless you have an unlimited budget or some significant reason for massive computing power, like you're trying to develop the next Skynet, typically an Intel i7 or an AMD Ryzen 7 will perform about the same for most functions. So take your pick. An i9 or Ryzen 9 is most likely just overkill and processing power you won't ever use. Now for RAM, here's one where I'll say the more the better. I've never heard anyone say they were disappointed with the additional RAM they put in a machine, unless it was to say they didn't put enough. Check the new machine's capacity, and if you can afford it, get at least 32 gigs of RAM or more. This is one upgrade you'll never be disappointed with. 1 terabyte or more of solid-state storage. Like hard drives, solid-state storage has a maximum capacity, and when you're out of space, you're out of space. It's easier to have extra space available and not have to replace the disk or operating system with new storage. If the cost of doubling or tripling or more of your storage is in your budget, I say go for it. Recommendations for Mac hardware. Most of these same recommendations apply, although for the CPU you're limited to Apple Silicon, but they do rate their CPUs by the number of cores, so the same point still applies. The more cores, the more powerful the processor or CPU will be. And Macs most especially are difficult to upgrade, if not impossible at times. Or you'll need to take it to an authorized Mac service center or Genius Bar, dealer, or ship it off to Apple and have them upgrade it for you in the future if that's what you need. This is all the more reason to properly evaluate what you need and purchase it when you get the device so as not to have to do it later on. One other thing on hardware, there's also the GPU or graphical processing unit. This is a big fancy way of saying the video card or adapter that's in the machine. Depending again on the answer to the question, what are you going to be using the machine for, you will want to consider having or getting a better video card or chipset when buying the machine because it may be impractical, extremely expensive, or impossible to upgrade later on. If you're going to be rendering video, gaming, or performing other graphics-intensive applications, get the best video adapter or card you can afford. Question 4. What is your budget? It always boils down to money, doesn't it? Well, a new computer is no different. Computers come in a very wide price range with numerous features and options, not to mention warranties and other things. Coming up with a number you're willing to spend, and then from there, look at each individual component, figure out if and where you need to compromise, and keep to that budget while getting the best components and machine possible. Question 5. Operating system preferences. For a PC, that question typically boils down to running Windows or Linux. Now, unless you've previously jumped onto the Linux bandwagon or you really hate yourself, you're probably going to be running a flavor or version of Windows. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with Linux, but the vast majority of software that individuals typically run on a daily basis, not to mention adding devices such as printers, scanners, thumb drives, etc., are simply easier to do in Windows. Now, I'm sure many of you will disagree with me, but for the mainstream users, Windows is simply easier for you to use and just works for the most part. Now, for a Mac, well, you're going to be running OS X. It's the operating system written by Apple for running on Apple devices and works, you guessed it, with all things Apple. When you control all the hardware through the entire computer ecosystem, it's amazing how well things can simply just work. So you know what makes me grumpy? Oh, the sheer joy of venturing into the realm of buying a new computer. It's the grand stage where the clueless meets technology. You see, some folks wander into this domain with the fascinating belief that paying attention to hardware requirements is for nerds, and that the idea of buying software to run on their shiny new machine is some sort of geeky conspiracy. And oh, the melodrama that unfolds when they discover that purchasing Windows didn't automatically grant them the keys to the Office kingdom. How dare Microsoft not bundle Office with Windows? It's almost like expecting a free appetizer because you were magnanimous enough to order the entree and then throwing a fit when reality strikes. Newsflash. Office is a separate entity with its own price tag, much to the chagrin of budget-conscious and the uninformed. But wait, there's more. If you're bidding adieu to your ancient relic of a computer, brace yourself. Depending on the archaic software that resides in that old machine, you might just have to repurchase your essential applications, or heaven forbid, explore new ones because, surprise, the old programs have now joined the ranks of the obsolete. Welcome to the modern world where software evolves and your old programs might just not cut it anymore. Oh, the humanity. The inevitable end of yet another episode of the Grumpy Sysadmin looms, and as your host, I can barely contain my enthusiasm. Oh, the joy. If today's topic tickled your fancy or poked at your frustration, go ahead and give that like button a nudge. It's right there, so don't be shy. Oh, and if you haven't yet sacrificed your peace by hitting that subscribe button, now's as good a time as any. Go ahead and make my day. Let's not forget the illustrious notification bell, shall we? Give it a jolly good ring and you'll be graced with a heads up whenever I decide to drop another nugget of grumpy wisdom upon the world. Your digital life will never be the same and you'll have a front row seat to every snark-filled episode. The magic of technology. Until next time, keep your patience short, your passwords long, and as always, stay grumpy.